I've been a pollster for many years, polling for U.S. Senate to city clerk and everything in between. And it has been quite a ride. And in 2016, we realized that polls have now, in their traditional sense, run their limit. There are just way too many problems with current polling techniques, and it causes us to search for new options. It's important to understand the 5 elements that go into polling. And once you understand each component, I believe you'll have a better understanding why it is not necessarily conspiracy that creates a poll whose outcome is inaccurate, but also its incompetence. And that the real skill in polling is being able to conduct all 5 of these elements with the same professionalism and skill set. The first part of a poll is the question. It sounds so simple, but how you word the question is important as to what type of answers you will elicit. I can phrase a question 5 different ways, the same question, and each of them will elicit a different emotional response from you. If I'm using it just simply as the first question as a knockout question to decide if you will be included in our poll, if I'm a conspirator, I can write the simple phrase, do you plan to vote this November, in a way that for certain parties, if I didn't want them to be involved in our poll, they'd simply knock themselves out. They would say no based on how I phrased that question. The second part are the responses. Equally important, if not more. Each response, if I give you a multiple choice response, how are you going to answer the response based on the answers that you are given as your options? I can give you 4 different responses, different options, and I can detail them and create them in a way that I can in most cases, guess that you're going to pick option A, B, C, or D as your option. That's the importance, the skill of a wordsmith. And a pollster is, if nothing else, a wordsmith. So is the pollster being a conspirator, or is the pollster being incompetent when they write words and phrases in a way that are confusing, words and phrases in a way that do not at all elicit what the pollster is trying to accomplish? Again, not saying that it's conspiracy, not saying that it's incompetence, just saying that each of these first 2 elements are important, critically important. And if you understand wordsmithing, understand how people hear, you'll realize that these 2 elements are quintessential to good polls. The third element are the calling lists. Sounds so simple, right? But where are we getting these lists from? I can purchase lists now from a myriad of companies who will sell me Republican, Democrat, Independent, whatever list I want. And based on those lists, it's going to influence the responses that I get, because each of these lists are critically different. The lists, I have no way, the pollster, of knowing if these lists are true or false. In other words, when you say it's a blend of 50% and 50%, or most often it's like 30, 30, 40, or 40 Republican, 40 Democrat, 20 Independent, do I really know? I mean, do they really know that list that well? And so the list becomes critical on in typical phones polls, because that's how we're polling today. That in 2016, we have not advanced all that far when it comes to polling. We still make phone calls, ask people questions. Now that begs the question: who's picking up the phone? How many people actually have a landline in their home anymore? What's the typical age of the person who has this landline? I think you can understand most people today are walking around with cell phones in their pocket, and they're not on any call lists. And if they are on a call list, it's pretty rare. So it's time that we look at different ways of approaching political polling, because the old way is outdated in many parts of the equation. So to review, we have asking the question, how it's worded, what the question responses are, your options, how they're worded. Third, the call list. Who are we actually calling for these polls? You can understand how any way along those 3 items, I can influence the outcome of a poll without even working that hard at it. You could do it. The fourth part is the person asking and answering and receiving the answers of the poll. This is a critical part that's so overlooked. I'm not sure if you've been in a phone bank, been to a whether it's for outgoing, incoming phone calls, for selling pillows on TV, but that's typically what a polling phone bank looks like. It's individuals who they're not committed to this. This is not their passion. This is not their typically is not their stated goal in life. Rather, it's an income source. And so they show up, they do their 6 to 8 hours of telephone work a day. The phone dialer just keeps dialing for them over and over, because a typical poll takes like 50 numbers to be dialed out before you get one response. So the dialer is just constantly going. Somebody comes live on the phone, and bam, they're into action right there. The person making $10 an hour, maybe $12 an hour, is now the person who we have trusted with the poll. Everything we've done, the questions we've asked, the responses that we've gathered, the phone list that we've gathered, all comes down to the skill of asking the question and the skill of listening to the answers and properly recording the answers. This sounds so simple, but what we know from just an educational purpose, in a typical classroom setting, if 20% of what you're saying as an instructor is being heard by your students, you're having a great day. Likewise, with new technology and how fast the world works, and our attention span is so low right now, how much are you really listening and hearing the questions being asked to you? Now, I, as a pollster, if I'm on the phone, I'm going to be enthusiastic. Hi, I'm Scott. I'm calling from USA Instant Poll, and you would hear the inflection in my voice. But the typical person asking the poll questions, working in a phone bank, they're not that enthusiastic. This is their job. They just have to get through it so then they can make some money to pay their rent. That's the harsh reality of what the polling situation has been reduced to. So now the person asks the question in a drone kind of voice, and they listen for an answer, and then they record the answer, and they have to read the answers as well, and they record the answer. They've been trained to record the answer. Now, a couple things come into play here. First of all, do they have their own political affiliation where they don't like candidate X or Y? Now all of a sudden they're going to influence the poll? This is a lot of power for somebody making $10 an hour who really doesn't care about somebody's aspirations. They're not there in search of truth. These people have not taken an oath and said, okay, I'm going to do exactly what's asked of me in this polling business. Not at all. They're there, they're hearing what they want to hear. And so we don't know what the real answers are. And I think that has a lot to do with it. That's filed under incompetence to me. That's not conspiracy. That's just incompetence. Somebody along the way not doing their job. So, and even if they do hear, okay, they're not influencing the poll with their own personal agenda, but are they actually hearing what's being said? Did the person really say A, B, C, or D? Did they hear it appropriately? We all hear things differently, and we record things. Did we hear it and then properly record it? The amount of errors, I've done research, where I would listen to the phone calls and listen to and then go back and see exactly what was recorded. 40% error rate in a typical poll room. That's what I have found. Finally, the fifth part of a poll is the interpretation of data. People like me, I receive all this data back. What does it mean? What do I make of it?